Hello. Welcome to Car Simps episode 2. For all of you that watched the first episode and liked it and gave good feedback, or even if you hated it and gave negative feedback, thank you so much for watching, listening, and hearing Elliot, what he does every single time he goes out on a first date, which talks about Corvettes for hours and hours.
They
and
love it.
The girls run screaming.
Oh,
yes.
Yes. Gone.
It was a very interesting sit through the whole history of the Corvette, but I don't think you should start with that when you take a woman
I probably
from
shouldn't
Tinder
open
out.
up with that with
You
women.
should probably open with, ask them questions about what they, about themselves.
Well, it's also bizarre because I'm talking about Corvettes and we arrived in a Prius. It's very confusing. But
Right.
They're just,
And Rob, well, he really didn't have much to contribute because he's never owned a Corvette.
No.
Doesn't
Doesn't like
really
them.
like
No,
Corvettes.
I won't say doesn't like them. I don't appreciate them like I should.
We learned a lot about him and meeting his wife at the Stang Bang
yeah,
because
let's
he's a
not
Mustang
bring that
enthusiast.
up again.
And so there were a lot of
one and
references to that, but it is Rob's turn to tell a story. So that is what this podcast is. I am mostly just an entertained audience member to my friends here, Rob and Elliot, who are going to tell me stories. They alternate every other week. So Elliot had the Corvette. This week, Rob being a hot-blooded Italian, which I need to remember that we don't have jump cuts or anything in this, is going to tell us about Enzo Ferrari, another hot-blooded Italian.
Oh, was he hot-blooded?
I've heard that name.
He was real hot-blooded.
So what hot-blooded things have you done this week? I see you brought some good whiskey, huh?
Yes, I brought a little bit of whiskey. That is Ed Bolian's private barrel pick called Shrewd Negotiator.
Yes.
You can buy that, I believe, online for $100-something.
But you're not stocking it in your area yet.
No, it is not available in our area, but it is available online to states that they ship to, which are most now.
And you haven't killed anyone in the liquor stores lately as far as like
no, liquor
store
stores were
owners or
quiet
anything
this
else?
week. Everyone
All right.
was behaved. It was nice.
All was quiet on the liquor store front.
I've this 42 on my head. I coach a 9-10-year-old kid pitch baseball team for
Right.
League 42 in Wichita.
which I called him in the middle of
the
a game, and he answered it instead of coaching his team. So
Now,
that's
let me
how
explain
that's
why.
how devoted he is.
I'll explain why that
we
is.
spoke for like 5-7 minutes.
Yes, we did, and that was because at the time we were losing 11-1, and there was really no hope.
Yeah, you had no
There's
more
no
inspirational
coaching.
coaching.
This other team, and I'm not kidding. These kids, they showed up with like $400 bats. They had the best gloves, the best. I mean,
Were they juicing 8-year-olds?
Yes, it's supposed to be a 9-10 team.
Little Mark
league.
McGuire showing.
Literally, one of the kids I swear had a beard. Like I guarantee it. I was like, that kid's got a beard. He can't be 10.
Yeah.
And so we put our best effort forward. We were only down 4-0 in the fourth, and then they got 7 more runs, and then you called, and
the
my kids were all crying on the field, and I'm like, well, they're done. So I was
much
like,
for the motivational
yeah,
speech.
it
You just
wasn't
kind of
gonna
tuned them
happen.
out and left. And
there was no at 11-1. It's time to go home, and it's snack time for the kids. They get their orange
So now
slices, and they're done.
The kids know now when coaches walk away. You're like 11-1. It's like,
Well, if it was
giving it down.
11-1 against a bad team, I think we'd come back. But when it's a team that was that good, it was like, all right, boys, you did your
it's
best.
always very inspirational to watch your coach give up on you. I'm pretty sure it's good for him.
And the BMW 6 Series that you bought last week is behaving itself.
Yeah, it did. It did do a yellow bong on the way back from our Eureka Springs trip over the weekend with a minimum oil warning, followed by an orange bong about 30 minutes later with a very minimum warning oil.
So it's guzzling oil, and that's why it was traded in.
I hope not.
We've discovered like, there's no reason.
great.
People dump a car, trade it in for a reason, and usually with a BMW that's 10 years old, it's a catastrophic reason. So you have valve seals that are going out on your engine.
I don't. No, it's
You
an
have
N, what is
valve
it?
seals.
N55? I don't know my engines.
You have valve seals going out on your engine. It's a BMW
But
thing.
what if it just had low oil to start?
Well, you should have.
Then it would.
Why am I checking?
Just drinking it.
No,
There's a
it's
reason.
a new car.
It's
It
a
should
oil
be
with
low.
It doesn't just
100,000
disappear.
miles.
It doesn't just.
No,
it
but if
doesn't
it was
just
low to start with, it could have went to the minimum.
And then it got lower.
And then it got
So
lower.
think about that.
But I mean, I did drive it for about 1,000 miles before it bonged at all.
Which
So
your Prius uses a lot of oil,
It
right?
does, yes. But I'd stay on top of it because of that.
But what's worn out in your Prius? What's it?
I think it really is like a clogged PCV system, and who knows? It has a lot of miles on it. I mean, we're at like 233,000 on it.
Right.
And you all know that the second gens will run forever as long as you keep oil in them because they have a capacity of like 3 quarts or something
and
insane.
don't put nitrous on them. That's the one
That
thing
also
that I
helps.
learned. That's the instant death for the
In a
second
big
generation
way.
Prius.
Yes.
that was a great
Yep.
video, though.
And that car it still gets a lot of attention in Monterey. Where those guys still driving it? that other channel.
Oh,
the
right.
orange one, yeah.
Because we saw it years later, and it was
because
people were-
DDE
we saw it at
bought
Bobby.
it, and then they
Yeah,
gave it
walking down the
away.
street.
Yeah.
And then sold it to somebody. Yeah,
Yeah, but we saw it on the street. We were like, oh, hey.
Mr. Lucci, I think is
Yes,
what it was.
that sounds
Any of
familiar.
you
Italian.
sort of-
I believe
sort
I
of
have
took
something
over-
on him in my
I know-
notes.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
Susan Lucci's husband.
Yeah, that sounds right.
She
Well,
alive?
okay. So Enzo Ferrari, a very interesting man, and he recently had a film about him with the Kylo Ren from Star Wars. What's his name?
Oh,
Oh well, I'm not
Gosh,
good with
dang
actors.
it.
Oh, whoever
I know
that
his name.
actor
What's
is.
his-
yes.
what's his name, Jake?
He was a Marine. He's very tall.
Chris Pratt.
no.
That,
Damn
oh
it.
my, that.
oh,
is the guy.
Adam Driver.
Adam Driver.
Wow,
there
not
you
Chris
go.
Pratt.
Yes.
Not even close.
Wow,
So
that was not.
he's played two Italians like Gucci and then Mr. Ferrari in the same film, but it was really just a snapshot of his life and grieving the death of his son and his wife dealing with the mistress and everything else and all the kind of conflict there leading up to the disastrous Mille Miglia where a bunch of people were killed and kind of messed up the Ferrari racing legacy of that time.
All the
Right.
racing legacies. That pretty much
Yeah,
stopped
that stopped.
Italian.
We even mentioned it last week during the Corvette that every manufacturer was like, hey,
Enough
we're
of
kind
this.
of chilling on
Well, it
racing.
killed
right?
5 kids.
Right. So
And like 80 people.
9.
how far back do we have to go to where your family's in the old country, Rob, as an Italian?
As an Italian, they were, I'm going to say probably the late 1800s.
Okay.
Would be about when they came over. Because my great grandmother she came over then. My grandmother would not have. She was born
it would have been when people didn't want Italians in the U.S.
Oh,
That
yeah,
was
no,
when,
yeah, no, they didn't like it, no.
No, more Italian,
No,
and
but
then
I
they
mean,
were
yeah,
treated
they all
terribly.
found their way to New York and they stayed there.
Yeah, and then
Right.
you guys made your own neighborhood and
Yeah,
stayed
I mean,
away
and
from-
we still, and
Yeah.
they all my family, they still live in the same neighborhood.
Are you Italian on both sides?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
My mom she's not dead. She's 83. That's really rude, but she's Sicilian background. Sorry, Mom. Love you.
I was
Glad
gonna
you're
say,
still hanging in
she
there.
listening to this?
Keep it going. She's Sicilian. Oh, jeez. And my father, what was he? Northern Italian? I'm trying to think of where he
probably
was
some city
from.
up
But
there.
I mean, yeah, they were both Brooklyn. My dad was a dock worker. My mom was typical Italian who sat at home and
Do all
cooked and-
Sicilians have the nipples like in The Godfather?
I've not seen my mom's nipples. I don't know.
You have at some point.
Well, maybe once.
That's
I mean,
just
maybe
one
when I
thing
was
that stuck
8.
with me. I'm watching the Godfather series, and then he
Right.
meets his wife, and she takes her. Anyway, where am I?
What in the world?
That's
Why
what
are we
stuck with
talking
you about
about
what
my
are your
mom's
mother's
boobs
nipples?
like?
I'd almost want her to be dead at this point. Are you kidding me?
take
Oh
take,
my
take
God.
a drink of
Hey,
Vin whiskey.
yeah, I might. Hold on. I
That's
need to.
where,
Yeah.
that's where my mind went.
Because now
Oh,
we're all
boy.
thinking about your mom's nipples.
No, okay,
And,
all right. Enough
you
of the no. Can we talk
So-
about Stang Bang, please?
Okay.
Oh, that's when you
Please
know you've
bring
struck
that
a
up
chord.
when it's bad.
When that gets brought up by preference.
I just
Oh,
assumed
Motto.
that was the Sicilian thing. I don't know, or maybe it was
Well,
that
what
actor.
have you seen? The Sicilian nip was one guy.
No, I'm talking about the female in the anyway.
her.
If you've seen The Godfather,
Well,
you would
yes.
know. And you saw it as a teenager, and you hadn't seen many breasts yet. It was a memorable moment for me.
I need to go rewatch this. Did I miss this? Were
Apparently.
they like?
or they
Were they
was
just
it-
kind of like pingy, or were they more?
Anyway, we're off.
They
the
were-
rails.
You did this.
They
I
were
know.
Sicilian.
I
You
started
did
it. I
this,
started
all right?
it, and
Gonna
we
point
need to
that
stop.
out.
So,
Supposed to talk about Enzo Ferrari after this.
What
I don't
were
know
his nipples
I'm
like?
just going to point this out. I don't
Yeah,
know
please,
what his
what were his
wife's
nipples
nipples
like?
were like at all.
Did we have one shirtless picture of Enzo?
We did not. No,
Well,
I didn't want to subject you to that.
come on.
So
His
with
cat,
these
maybe.
with these stories, not necessarily what their body parts look like, but as far as I wanted to read between the lines, because I'm sure a lot of you know the history of Ferrari or somewhat, and a lot of it's been highlighted in different movies recently, like Ford versus Ferrari and all that stuff. But Enzo himself, he lived a really long time,
He did.
Like-
90 years old.
long time. So from like the what,
1898 to 1990. What 19? Would that be 1988?
so he
So, yeah, 90s.
he lived through 2 world wars.
Mm-hmm.
He lived through all kinds. I mean, feast, famine, all the racing glory days, and to see sort of the rise of Ferrari being this household luxury brand, with Miami Vice and everything else, and the F40. I mean, it's just, that's so much. I mean, most of these guys were dead at 50. They
Oh,
heart
absolutely.
attacked out
And
and
he-
they were done. So
He almost didn't make it. He almost didn't get past 16. When we'll talk about that in a little bit as well.
well, okay then. Let's get into it then.
Okay. Well.
Take a big drink there.
Yeah, I'm thinking.
Loosen up.
Yeah, loosen up. I'd like to point out that yes, I am sitting with 2 wonderful presenters who do a wonderful job as their day jobs and whatever else they do. of presenting wonderfully.
You don't sell yourself short.
You're
Oh,
so
no,
You're a salesman. You're a born salesman.
Salesman, yes, on things that like when you talking about like a storyteller. I tell amazing stories on my life and because I know it. Something like this is exciting for me, but it's out of my comfort zone because the last time I did something like this, I think was in the 5th grade when I had to do a book report on cows and why they were good for the economy.
Well, why were they good for the economy?
Just pretend you're telling a story about Elliot's personal life to a friend that doesn't know
something, and then, that
it's just
one of Tyler's favorite passages. I can't tell you the amount of times.
Just the excitement of telling someone who doesn't know what has happened to Elliot's, women.
Yeah,
and for those of you
who
don't know, Tyler really does love doing that.
I love it.
We'll be in a car, and he'll be like, "Did I ever tell you the time?" And Elliot fills in the blank. You fill in the blank, whatever it is. Dinner table. He's got a story ready to rock.
Well, in fairness, those are your stories.
Unfortunately, that was the one condition of the podcast where I'm sworn to secrecy on all this stuff. Where not really, but
you can imply certain things. Certain things you're more than welcome to tell.
Anyway, and for those of you that want to help Car Simps grow, I have set up a Patreon, mostly to take care of these two gents right here and all the time and research they put into it. And there'll be some special perks for Patreon members if you join. It is linked below. But today, we're going to have a fun time with Rob and Ferraris. Enzo Ferrari.
You
said
Ferrari.
1898.
Born in 1898.
8 pounds, 6 ounces, sweet baby Enzo.
Look,
that is not baby. That's his baby photo. He came out of the womb pissed off and bald.
So it was an Italian Benjamin Button situation.
This is going so well.
And it's pixelated. All right. You got the big photos for us.
That's literally him exploding onto the seat.
Yes.
Oh boy.
So that is.
Yes. So this is
he was born to Alfredo.
No, come
and Adalgisa Bisbini.
They did a great job
his
on
father
that
and his mother. Thank you. It was not easy to do.
So they named people after sauces even back then?
Oh, always.
Wow.
It's an Italian thing.
Alfredo Bizzini.
No, Alfredo was the father.
Oh, okay.
Adalgisa is the mother, but she took her name, Bisbini. Did not take Ferrari.
Okay.
And they ran a metalworking shop.
Oh, so he was already around all of it.
Absolutely.
Where'd my drink?
So he grew up in his father's metalworking shop. He was really excited about, that was his kind of passion as a young boy. He always loved working with that and following his father around and things like that. And they would also find him singing.
Well, what would they have made out of metal in the late 1800s, I guess, because, cars weren't around yet.
It was more like railroad, things like that. I mean, because they worked near a railway. So they supplied metal to local, rail yards, things like that. And so he got excited about just basically the fabrication side of things. He was really, really good about, he was just really in tune to it. And he also loved to sing when he was walking around. And his dream was to someday become an opera singer, which in Italy,
it was a very feasible dream.
That was like
a
really big thing to be an opera singer in Italy. Was like, Hollywood famous.
Some of the best
unbelievable
singers in the world as far as Pavarotti and
so Alfredo. Linguini.
I was Father Pasta.
You are able to make those jokes being Italian.
Yes, I can get away with it.
I am not making any Mario Spaghetti, any kind of jokes
just
at all.
Did one. Mario Spaghetti is not a real person.
I'm not doing that.
You just did.
I think give it some time.
Well,
I think it's going to be hard not to.
Rob Freddy's a YouTuber, and then we all call him Mr. Spaghetti.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine.
Okay.
Italians we're kind of safe.
You got good humor about this?
They're not.
Oh, look at that. There's some Alfredo right there.
That's Enzo's dad.
Now Jake is getting us hungry and canceled, right?
Yeah.
now. Okay.
Thank you, Jake.
So this is Enzo's mother right
and we've
here.
Just gotten
the father. The
father. This is Father Pasta.
What do they call that when they push you down on views because this happens?
Yes, we're getting suppressed.
Yes, suppressed. Thank you. There he is. A young vibrant Enzo Ferrari.
8 pounds 6 ounce sweet baby.
Yes, he is
right
beautiful. There. Holy crap.
Okay.
I just want to be like, thank you for watching.
So
there's a lot more.
He was a handsome chap. Okay.
So
yes, he was. He was a handsome young. There he is. Now
there's a young.
That is a young Enzo Ferrari.
Okay.
With what I can only assume is not his father, but we don't know.
We're not going to guess what his name is. We need to stop.
If I was,
if I were to guess, it would probably be Giuseppe Ballerini.
No, Carl.
Elliot.
He looks like a Carl.
Yeah,
Carl.
John Smith. John Smith
that's
riding with you.
You're right.
Elliot, yeah. Carl is where you have to go with this. So he did attend his first race in Bologna. This is every word.
Yeah.
when he was 10 years old. He got to see his first actual...
In 1906 then, or 1908?
1909.
Those were the real...
It was like right around 1908, 1909.
Cars were barely cars. They were barely working.
It was a hill climb.
Yeah.
He saw his first hill climb, and that's when he was like, went from the fabrication to the railway side to like, oh my God, I want to be involved with cars. Like that was his passion. So he started just kind of on his own building little cars and things in his shop and doing like that. And just, he had some passion for that. And unfortunately, in 1916, his dad, Alfredo, and his older brother, Alfredo Jr., both died.
Yikes.
Italians, they had a nasty flu outbreak and killed both.
Why is Jake laughing hysterically?
He's upset because Alfredo died. How am I supposed to get through this if you can't get through this?
Because he's ready.
You're the one that I would hope would be the least likely to get through this.
Alfredo Jr. makes the most sense. That's the smaller pasta. That's what it's on the menu. They call it that sometimes.
That's Burger King, the
Alfredo
Jr.
They call it the Alfredo Jr.
If his name was Alfredo Jr., what else is there to be?
That's what they call it.
We made it 2 episodes to the end of Car Simps.
This is the end of this. My God, why did you make me do this?
So they died from the flu.
Well, he's not. Yeah, they've died. This is past that. But yes, they both died, and Enzo himself nearly died in the same outbreak. But he actually was in the hospital for months, was discharged, and at the time he had actually entered the Italian army. Okay. So he was actually, and then he got honorably discharged out of that because of his medical, his medical diagnosis from what happened with the flu outbreak. So then he decided, okay, well, this is my chance. What am I going to do? I can go opera and have a career as a beautiful opera singer, or I can race. And as we all know, what he chose to do, he chose to race.
Yes.
And this is what, 1920s
1919?
Wow.
Right about 1919, somewhere in there.
Okay. I had no idea Ferrari was this far back as far as like
it's
in
way
racing
back.
and cars.
And it's not even Ferrari at this point. This is where it gets interesting about that. So what happened was he decided that he was like, okay, I've got to go race. But then with his parents, or with his father dying, then their metalworking business folded. So they were in trouble. The family was in trouble. Yeah. He had no older brother anymore. So now it's just him.
Alfredo Jr.
It's not funny.
I was in a groove, and then you just tanked it again. Yes. So what he decided to do first, he wanted to get a job with Fiat. So he went to Fiat and said, hey, this is my background. This is my passion. And Fiat said no. Turned him down. Which you can imagine. Can you imagine what would be different today if Enzo Ferrari got a job under Fiat?
Been a loyal company man at Fiat.
They wouldn't have been with, what are they, Stellantis?
Well, Fiat would have been one of the... at the time,
boy, did it go bad for them.
But Fiat was one of the larger manufacturers, at the time, certainly. It would have been a pretty great career, just... Think about it. How many they had? Alpha, they had Fiat, and I'm sure it was like America where they had a few other startup car companies.
Yeah, there was a little bit, but that was like
one of the big.
That was the big combined yet. Alpha and Fiat.
No,
in the 20s probably not.
Yeah. So it was like I said, that was like that would have been the head gig, like the big company to work for. So after he got denied with that, he took whatever he could get, which is where he found a company called CMN, and he was a test driver, and they were basically responsible for building passenger cars with used truck bodies, like on a passenger car frame. That is one of the first CMNs. So he was one of the first involved with building those.
So they were taking old beat up trucks and making them into cars?
Yes. In a sense, they were taking old truck bodies and putting them on car frames.
Interesting.
Okay.
And that is what the result was.
I do love that there's an image of this.
So he's making hoopties.
He's making hoopties, which I knew you'd appreciate, which is why I put that in there.
Wow.
And so they entered their first race in 1919. Enzo Ferrari as the driver with a CMN car, and he finished fourth.
So are they using the truck motors as well?
I don't know. They never said what the motors were that were in those cars specifically, but I would imagine it would have been the truck.
It would make sense. Like you have a big truck motor and you take all the weight off, and then boom, you have a race car, right?
Yeah, you'd have something that could move.
And back then they were like 700 cubic inch 4-cylinders.
Right.
It was so cool. Like I'm saying, if you've ever seen any of these early cars, and they do it, we've gotten to see it at Monterey a few times. The brass era race cars, and this is pre-brass really, are just these big thumping, nuts sounding cars, and these guys are really driving. It would have inspired me. You have to have a ride-on mechanic
like this too.
Yes,
yeah.
Clearly.
Oh, there's a better one.
There's a better picture of the CMN.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he finished fourth. in that car,
In
which
a
is
truck,
amazing.
in a
First
car.
race.
Absolutely terrified in that
Well,
picture.
I would too. Could you imagine being a passenger in one of
So
those?
yeah, Enzo's sitting. He's looking kind of cool and calm on the passenger side, or what is the right side? I guess
Yes.
the driver's side in Italy, and
that's your ride-on mechanic.
the ride-on mechanic
Literally
is like,
what
we're
that
gonna
would be.
die.
Mhm.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
and
because
they're offset a little bit. They shove their seat back a little bit because these guys have fighting room.
And that
they're
thing
not
is-
sitting directly
Yeah,
side
you
by
can
side.
see he's kind of
yeah,
at his
because
three-quarter,
trust me,
which is
your
impressive.
elbows in this thing.
It looks tall too, as far as the center of gravity, as far as tipping over. As
oh my
well.
goodness! And you have
Yeah.
half-inch wide wheels, wooden
look at
artillery
those.
wheels.
Look at that. I mean,
you
how
know,
you could keep that on a road, I don't know. But impressive to finish
Very
fourth in your
impressive.
first race. I mean, that.
Yeah.
So that got some eyeballs on him, which was really exciting. And then through the 20s, he went on to win 13 of the 47 races that he entered.
still with
As,
CMN.
as him driving.
As him driving. Now, that
Wow.
was considered good of the time, but not great. Because the great drivers then were winning everything. You know, they were winning everything.
but
So
he's in
13
a hoopty. He's in a repurposed truck.
Yeah, but I mean, he was an amazing fabricator. The guy could build a car.
Okay.
So he could take something that was a hoopty and compete. And he was really strong. But one of the knocks on him that a lot of people said early on in his racing career was that he didn't go hard on the car too much because he didn't want to hurt the engine. Because the engine to him was like the heart, the lifeblood of the car. So he was.
This seems
They
like a
thought that
theme.
if he actually would have just not cared and just driven the wheels off the thing, that he would have been able to be incredibly fast and would have won 30, 35 of the 47 races. So he was just basically, in his mind, the car itself was a life, it had a life of its own, had a soul, so that he didn't want to hurt it. Now, it's interesting that this man that did that, later on we're going to learn, went to the other side where, you know, we're going to talk about that.
I was going to say he doesn't strike me as a guy who has mechanical sympathy, but
No,
sounds like
he has
started off
a lot of mechanical
some-
sympathy. He does not have a lot of empathy and does not have a lot of
for people.
So he cares more about his engines and his cars than,
Yes.
than the drivers,
people.
and that'll come up here in a little bit as to why that is.
Whoa.
Gotcha.
So basically, he had a successful career. I mean, that's not bad, 13 to 47. So he retires in the early 30s to focus on building his own cars in a race team. He decides that, you know what, I love racing cars. It's my passion, but I want to build them. I want to own a team. I want to be the front man. I want to be the name. So then he gets on with Alfa Romeo. So he's hired on with Alfa Romeo, I think in 1929, while he was still kind of ending his career, and then proceeded to then start his Ferrari, which is his name behind it. So when he was hired with Alfa Romeo, he actually was able to have
What the heck is going on with the? Okay.
that actually.
He's man-spreading, I
So that
believe,
is not him.
is what that's
There's that will be the next thing we talk about.
So for the people listening, we need to describe these photos. Basically, there's a man sitting on a 60s Ferrari, looking like he's, I don't know, pooping on it.
It does look like his legs are just about as wide as they could
But
comfortably
that
go.
was a random picture change. So anyway,
Yeah, so-
back to
Yes,
back
that's
to
right. We'll
back
get
to
back to him.
1930.
He's at the end, but there's a good
So
story about that.
1930, we're with Alfa Romeo.
So Alfa Romeo, but he
and-
was under his own name. So he was with Alfa Romeo, but under Ferrari, and that's where the Cavallino Ramparte was born. Now, do we know what that is?
another made up.
That sounds like the name
Cavallino
of a horse.
Ramparte.
Oh, okay. Yes.
That the Ferrari, the pixelated Ferrari shield.
This is why they call it the Cavallino
Yes.
Classic.
That is exactly why.
Okay.
Yes, and that's why I
Okay.
love having you
Gotcha.
around for this, because your knowledge of these things
Yeah.
plays into this very well. What do you contribute? Anyways,
Jeez.
oh, sorry, that's the bourbon talking. I
Only
really appreciate the
The
opportunity.
set, the podcast,
That's
Korean
for
YouTube
full-
channel, The Editor with Jake.
That's four. That's
And
for
I'm
four
entertained.
Stang Bang references last week. Four. My
sorry.
wife's gonna watch that eventually, and I'm gonna be banished.
I think there were more than four.
There
I
probably
just
was.
got
We didn't talk about what happened at the Stang Bang. We
We're
just
not
said it was
going
an
to.
event
Okay,
that we
no.
went to. You brought it up. We're going to talk about what happened
No,
at the
we're
Stang
not.
Bang.
We're not.
We
All right,
will. We're
no,
gonna have to do a
we
whole
have a lot of
episode at some
Ferrari to
point.
get to. A
Your
lot
dead
of
friend's
Ferrari.
ears, you know.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a lot. Yeah, I don't think we can't even talk about those things.
Anyway.
Okay, so that was where the Cavallino Ramparte was born, which is the shield. So
And thank goodness he didn't name it after his dead father or
Alfredo Jr.
or
or
his
Alfredo.
brother.
Galloping Alfredo.
Can you imagine what's the Ferrari horse's
Oh
name?
my
Alfredo
God.
I mean, we already
Jr.
call them pasta rockets. Imagine
Oh
Yeah.
boy.
if
Oh,
God.
boy.
Okay.
Canceled after 2 episodes.
Yeah.
Here we go. So in 1937, Scuderia Ferrari was dissolved. So Ferrari had had enough. They had some differences on how they wanted their cars to go with Alfa Romeo. So Ferrari left to an established Auto Avio Costruzione, AAV. Which I believe is that beautiful logo
That's kind
right
of a
there.
cool- that's kind of a
So
cool
that was
symbol.
the early, and that is the first. That is Ferrari.
And-
His own. This is his own brand. So he has started this in 1937. So at the same time, he takes a tour of one of his factories and finds a woman named Lena Lardi.
I wouldn't have.
That
one of
sounds
his
like an
factories.
Italian movie star name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is the basis of his first and only that we know of extramarital affair. And there's Mrs.
Okay,
Lardi
so
right there.
he's married at this point already.
He's married at this point
and then
already.
his son was born. I know
Yes.
his son that died, but his
Yes,
son's been
and
born
then
by
it's-
already.
Yes, and so he met her around 1941 or 42.
Okay.
And all they had was just, it was just Enzo and her. And then unfortunately, in 1945, they had a child named Piero together.
Is this the woman? This is the factory worker.
This is the factory worker. Yes.
You know
this is
how
not his
rough
wife.
was his first wife that he was like, this factory worker woman is actually
Oh
looking.
boy.
Elliot.
Oh my God.
Elliot.
This is why you don't have a girlfriend.
No,
Are
I'm
you
saying,
kidding me?
It's not a.
Could you
I know,
imagine-
no,
could you
Tyler's just
imagine
holding back
Elliot
on
at-
telling a story
Can you
right now.
imagine
This is
Elliot
what
at the
he's
dinner
doing.
table with a girl when she sits down, his first thing is like, hey, so why are you here?
Let's drag through the last 5 women that Elliot slept with and see what they're rated at, because I guarantee you not any of them are
I wouldn't
over
put them
Oh,
in.
no,
I wouldn't put
Tyler,
them
no,
in.
never mind.
Tyler,
I
no,
wouldn't, hold on. I wouldn't put any
you
of
don't
them
want to go
in
to that level.
Italian factory worker level.
Anyway.
Okay.
So,
Anyway.
so Lena Lardi comes along, and that wasn't really found out until a few years later. But I think rumors had it that the wife knew all along, so it was kind of a known thing. But at that point, we're talking 1942, 1943.
That's more socially acceptable because
Back then, yeah, I mean,
Back then it was.
Yeah,
like,
Italian men were pigs. A lot of them back then. I hate to say it, but they were. They were chauvinists. They had a wife at home and they had a wife somewhere else. It was just kind of what people did. It's inexcusable, but it's what they did. So that was unfortunate, obviously, but it was part of Enzo, as a lot of things we're going to talk about are. I mean, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'm not talking about
See, he's allowed to say it. I mean, come on.
you. Once again, you're the catalyst of this, which gets me in trouble.
Inexcusable, right, Elliot?
Completely.
Inexcusable.
Completely.
Yep.
So,
not
what
right.
else was going on in 1943 that would have probably taken away from this a little bit? What was happening? What was a big thing in the time of
1943?
42, 43?
I know what was happening.
Oh, WW2?
Yeah, WW2 was happening.
And
so
Italy went with Hitler
Yeah.
and
Yes,
was
they
going to
did.
join their
So-
party.
So Enzo was really worried about his factory in Modena. He was like,
Yeah,
he
'cause they
didn't
were
want to get
bombing
bombed. They were
factories.
bombing. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
So he packed up, moved the factory to Maranello to avoid being bombed, because he didn't want any part of it. He's like, no, I can't afford to rebuild this. Italy's getting bombed pretty good. It's not, obviously it's going to be really hard to rebuild from this. So he moves everything to Maranello to a nice, beautiful factory, which gets bombed in 1944.
Damn.
Oof.
Yeah.
And then gets bombed again in 1945.
Oof. So he rebuilt, tried again, but what is he building for the war effort? Because it's not race cars, I
No,
imagine.
he was building parts for lots of parts for just, anything,
Axis
airplanes,
powers, yeah.
anything.
Whatever they needed, yeah.
Whatever, any fabrications they needed at that point, he was turned off from that.
Right,
And so
right.
then when they got bombed twice, he's like, well, I can't. I mean, you couldn't get financing on anything because everything was ruined.
Everything was in shambles.
So he had to sell off his personal cars, collections, everything he could to rebuild again, which was really, it was a big breaking point for him, because this is where are we going to go here? What's going to happen? So when he finally rebuilds it, he has his first ever Ferrari that he has now made. The first true Ferrari, which is the 125S.
Wow.
Which is beautiful.
Yeah.
The 125S, there are 2 known examples in the world. That's it.
And they are worth
$100 million.
100 million. So that's
Now-
more than 250 GTO, which
More
is
than a 250 GTO, but even
Yeah.
more so, I did the math. If you were to own every single Corvette from inception
it still
it wouldn't be worth
to,
one Ferrari.
to 2025 so what, 1953 to 20, if you got, I looked at the average to high retail of every single Corvette from 1953 to 2025. How much do you think your collection be worth
in
if you had
today's
one of
money?
each in today's
If
money?
you had a perfect one of every year.
Yes, perfect one of every year. See who gets closer. I'm
I'd
curious.
say for every single year, and we've had 70 years.
It's
honestly,
honestly,
let's say
And they evaluated the bad ones.
30 million.
I don't even know if it might be that high, because there's not a lot of crazy. It might only be 9 or 10 million.
2.9 million.
That's not right.
Wow.
There's,
That's right.
There's single Corvettes worth more than that.
Well, no, but they're talking about the average from the average car.
Oh,
I was
okay.
factoring in L88s.
Not like
Right,
we're not
yeah,
talking
stuff
about
like
like
that.
that.
Yeah.
Concours car.
Okay, I got it.
Average
The
car.
regular
All right.
car from that.
Yeah, the
Okay,
regular car.
Google
Okay.
AI told you that, but I
No, it
disagree.
did not.
Okay.
No, Car Gurus had a whole list.
Okay, car gurus,
But
right.
even still, if you think about it that way, you could own every one of those. And let's say it was 10 million.
Yes.
Yeah.
You could own
It still
how
wouldn't
many
be.
Corvettes to one of those, which really kind of gives you an idea of the iconic nature of what Ferrari is.
Right.
Now, of course, there's two of those. So that does kind of make a difference.
And Rob has owned 2 Ferraris in his
I have.
Ferrari ownership, and both of them.
Three, technically.
Well, that one didn't count. The one we sold to Bob in 5
Well,
seconds.
I had
but
it for like a minute.
you didn't own that car.
You
I
were
didn't own that car. It's fair.
Yeah.
The first one is the one he sold to me, the 355 that burned to the ground because he didn't do the fuel recall, and I didn't get to it in time because I barely owned the car before it burned to the ground. He had years
We
to do
already
it
talked
and
about
never
this.
did it.
You forgot
So
it.
that's the first one. The second one,
Oh my God.
the hood latch
up, Alfredo.
popped up and smashed the windshield, and he messed up a 430 that way.
Well,
so
who was he? Me?
technically he
I
wasn't driving.
wasn't driving that when it did that.
But
We're not
you-
going to talk about who was driving that, but
you bought a basket case, and then instead of sending it to someone to actually work on it, you just sent it to your friend's garage who drove
Well,
it with
they
the
do good
hood
work.
up. Yeah.
In
but-
fairness, I
mean-
drove it afterwards and it was fine.
it was a good car.
But-
It wasn't a basket case. It was a good car. It had a couple little things it needed, but it was a very good car. Like it had the interior was redone, the top was redone.
until the hood
This-
smashed into the windshield.
But it was because they didn't.
There's the
yeah,
the
there's,
first
there's
car.
the old 355. So
Well,
that
no-
Rob's Italian, and he's had Ferraris.
Wait,
That's why I thought this would be a good
hold on,
one.
I'm going to defend myself here. The hood was the reason why was because the person who was driving it had unlatched the hood to get in there to get something off the frunk. And then when he shut it, he didn't shut it all the way. So it was still unlatched and then took off and then it popped. It wasn't like it was latched and it was a basket case. That was a good prime example of a car that I bought. I was very proud of that one. One of the best ones.
Which is why you
drove
owned it for so long, right?
Because,
Well-
but because of all that
right.
bad stuff that happened to it, you didn't drive it. You put like 200 miles on it, and then you sold it, right?
Well, I sold it because I got it was a weird. Maybe you call that because some people get into that where they get old and they need a car. What is that? Your
midlife crisis.
midlife crisis type of thing. I thought that's what that was. When I got the car, I was like, this is going to be my last hurrah of feeling seen and being noticed in a flashy car. And then in the first 2 weeks I had it, everywhere I went, it was like people in minivans just flipping me off or cutting me off or, throwing a Sonic drink at the windshield. And I'm just like,
And now he has a bright yellow Porsche.
but that's a lot
911.
better. It's a Porsche. They all look the same. So you kind of blend in a little bit.
I
and
will
people
say
think
this:
it's cool.
it is a fact. I'd call it the gas station effect. If you drive a Corvette or a Mustang or something like that, everybody will want to talk to you. Blah 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 blah. If you drive a Ferrari, people will generally do this, not talking because there's an assumption that you're a rich a-hole.
I never get that.
Well, because everybody
already
knows
knows who
you're a
you
rich
are.
a-hole.
Well, maybe because it's not a bright red 430. It's
Well,
something
no,
more
I mean,
unique,
yeah,
like
I
the
mean, you're-
599.
it's
and the
599
Astros or whatever.
yeah.
Or, it's different.
Yeah, and your
So-
599 is gorgeous. That's
But it just is
timeless.
whether it's and also the normal person thinks a 430 is still a brand new Ferrari. They don't.
Well, then I
No.
had that 348 with bus seats in it. But,
Yeah.
So anyway, what year? So we're in 19 after World War
There's-
II.
Yeah, we're
There's-
after-
that's your actual.
That was
Ferrari.
my
Yeah.
actual 430. Yes.
So, but we're back
What a beauty.
into post World War II. His
Post World
first
War
car.
II.
What year was that car? The one of two.
The 102 that was 19. Hold on, I made my notes on that. The actual year of that. What was that?
Well,
I don't
wouldn't it be in the 100
Let's
million?
just say 1947.
Yeah, I would say it's right around that area. But
Yeah.
Okay. So
So-
his first car, holy smokes,
the 125S.
it's 47. Okay, it is stunning. I see the Super Leggera badge on the hood, so it's aluminum, I assume. Are they hand forming? Or were they probably banging this out
Yeah, he took
themselves?
his
in the
metal,
factory?
his
All-
metal
all hand-built.
experience. Did he design this too?
No, he was not the chief designer of it, but he oversaw it.
So he's
I
banging,
wanna say the
banging the
designer-
factory workers and banging out the metal on this amazing machine right
Absolutely.
here.
Elliot, would you like to give the designer's name for this? Because I'm sure you'll have a good one.
Don't stop.
Yeah,
Stop.
stop.
Anyway.
Sorry.
So what? So
That
$100
was
million car. There's only
100
two in existence.
only two in existence, yes.
Where's is this one in a museum somewhere? I don't remember seeing it in the Ferrari factory.
From what I was told, one of them is in New Zealand, I believe. I don't know where the other one is though. A family like a husband and wife have one in New Zealand.
Wow. Wouldn't expect.
Yeah, of
that's
all
kind
the
of
places
crazy
to
that
go.
it made its way over there.
And it's
Okay.
over there. It's
Oh,
just a
imagine the
beautiful
stress of
testament
shipping
to
that.
what Ferrari was going to become. So, with that, their first official win in any racing was 1948 in the Lago
pretty
di
quick.
Garda.
That's early.
Yeah, early on.
Yeah.
They were successful right off the bat. And now we're going to kind of talk a little bit about Ferrari and why they were so successful, Enzo, and what made him successful. I mean, the good and the bad. So things about Enzo that you probably knew. Obviously, very successful, very highly motivated, driven. The things you maybe didn't know, he was very reclusive. So he would not fly, never flew on a plane, never took a boat.
Because of being, you didn't want to be recognized or talked to?
I don't know. They never really said if it was an issue he had, but he just didn't like to fly, was never, that just wasn't him. He never really went to a lot of the races when he was older. He only basically would stick around his Fiorano test track, which we'll talk about that in a little bit as well.
Interesting.
So he was a very private man, but he also was one that was very demanding of his drivers. So what he loved to do is he loved to pit his drivers against each other. Because in his mind, unfortunately in his mind, the car was the success of everything and the drivers were just replaceable. So he didn't care if they hated each other, if they had teamwork, that didn't matter. He wanted them to be basically, at each other's throats at all times because he thought they would give their best if they knew their job was on the line.
So it's like if Ellen DeGeneres had a car company instead of a TV show or whatever, right?
Oh,
it's that kind of environment we're talking about.
Yeah,
okay. Very toxic. Yeah.
Yes, not good.
Okay.
But yes,
I do get that a little rivalry breeds some good competition, but that's you'd also need teamwork in racing.
You would think.
This is pretty normal at car dealerships where, they're angry for stealing customers and ups and all that stuff. And then it's usually an adversarial environment for the most part. You're all friendly until you're not. Then you just
because
want to kill
ultimately
each
you're for
other.
yourself. You have to be for yourself because if you're a Ferrari's top driver and then some young hotshot comes in and is getting all the wins, you're expendable.
But Enzo, famously known for not giving a crap about selling cars. I was just very interested in racing. So the selling the cars was a means to an end to fund his racing.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes. He didn't, it was all about him. It was racing. It was the racing. Ferrari to him was never to be a status symbol like it is now. He hated that. He could give two craps about road cars. It was him. He wanted everything into his racing side. That's all he focused on. The only reason why they started a sports car program was for the homologation rules for Mille Miglia and all these other races they had to enter. Obviously, you had to have a certain amount of production units to enter, so they had to make some cars, and so that's what he did. But he didn't want anything to do with that. He didn't care about that. He didn't care. He didn't oversee it. It didn't really bother him. And to him, his drivers that were racing were just vessels. Which is tough to think about as you're a driver that's putting your life on the line.
Back in the most dangerous period of racing.
It's deadly. Yeah. And you're over here, putting your life on the line for this guy, and he could care less. Like, in his mind, it's like, you die, oh well, pluck you out, bury you, we'll put another one in.
It's a bunch of guys trying to please their dad who will never be pleased.
Literally.
Yeah. I mean, in that kind of thing. You're like, I won it, Mr. Ferrari, and he's just still not happy.
It was bad.
But it seemed like life just in general had less value back then. I don't know.
They had witnessed pretty much, massive, almost a wipeout of people from the wars so close together that I think that would maybe desensitize you a little bit. And I mean, especially with the time, people losing their parents around them so young, I kind of get it, but it's still crazy to be like, especially ever have a brush with death yourself and then still be so cavalier about it with everybody else.
Yeah, and it was just part of signs of the time. I mean, back then, that's what you knew. We didn't have the safety that we have now. Right. So it's kind of
getting in a car wreck or a racing accident was pretty much a certain death. It wasn't like you were so used to guys walking away from 200-mile-an-hour accidents now.
Yeah, and back then you crashed at 70.
You got ejected from the car, and it's
But that strategy was a winning strategy.
Yes, it was, and it actually led to their first 24-hour Le Mans win in 1949.
Whoa!
So that was the first year they won Le Mans, and from there, that was what really catapulted them onto that's where Enzo's head got real big, and he's like, okay, this is legit. We're gonna really go full bore, and so they wanted to get into everything they could get into. And so in 1953, they wanted to go after America a little bit. They were like, you know what? Why don't we field a car for the Indy 500? So they did. And in his mind, his ego thought that he could just go over there and just crush them. I mean, just crush them.
Oh, because American sports cars, as Elliot talked about,
they were
Corvette.
they didn't even get them yet.
They were a decade behind. Yeah,
they were way behind. In his mind, with the name brand and the fact with the Le Mans win behind them, they could just come over here
and all they had to do was drive in a circle.
Yeah, simple.
Yeah, it's like they're probably like, this is easy. We got this.
And so they went out there and they crashed on the 41st lap of the race, and they were done.
Okay.
Did that
Ferrari's
driver's-
one and only foray into the Indy 500. It was.
I wonder if
over.
that car survives somewhere because the one Ferrari Indy car has to be worth also.
And there it is right there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That was the one, and that was it was a beautiful car. I mean, gorgeous car. It's obviously everything Ferrari builds, but it didn't make it.
That's
I don't know
interesting.
what happened exactly, why it crashed, but yeah, I mean, Indy's a tough beast.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no doubt about that. So when we talk about the 50s a little bit with Enzo Ferrari, this is kind of when it gets a little dark for him. It's a real tough time for him because in 1956, him and his wife, not mistress, but his wife, lost their son to muscular dystrophy.
Yeah.
So his name was Dino. And and from then on, he was just really in a bad place. He really got secluded and reclused himself and kind of just hid in his factory and in his main office and just didn't come out. So what that left his wife to run the operations. So she was the one in the factories going around and just getting on everybody to build the cars and get them everything, scheduling, you name it. She was doing everything.
Which is what we sort of saw in the movie with Ferrari, where
Yeah,
they were a team when it came to the
Absolutely.
business side of things.
Now, they were a team, and I think in the movie it really showed them as a successful team working, but what it didn't show, I'll have to remember back, but I don't believe it really showed the true consequences of what happened with that. So what that goes into is, and I'll talk a little bit about the Mille Miglia first, because while this was going on, Ferrari entered in the 1957 Mille Miglia, which is the famous one that had the crash,
Yes.
where one of their racing drivers
it's a 1,000-mile race through Italy with no limits, basically, on roads, normal roads, and people are just standing on the side of the road watching the cars go by. Extremely dangerous. Like, people died every year in it, basically, but this one was a massacre.
This one was the worst. And so one of their racing drivers was going 160 miles an hour when one of the tires blew out, causing him to go into a crowd of spectators, through them over a barricade, back onto the track and into another side, killing him, his co-driver, and 9 other people, including 5 children.
Jeez.
And so that was when everybody just stopped. That was it. That was the Italian, the government got involved, said, we're not doing this anymore. We are not doing any more road races, no public roads. That is the end of it. So this pretty much killed, these events as we know it, as it probably should have at this point. You're talking about 160 miles an hour. It's anything can go wrong. And you have, if you watch the old films, and some of you, we've all watched these, you see these cars screaming down, and there's just spectators that are just standing there, knowing that any minute a tire could blow, nothing would veer straight, and that's the end of it. But that's all they knew. That's how they knew it. But it took one big accident like this to just absolutely derail everything. So when that happened, Enzo was really already in a dark place. Everett was already reclusing himself. And then on top of that, he got prosecuted for manslaughter for this.
Right.
Wow.
This was in the film as well
Yes,
recently.
he was prosecuted for manslaughter because they were driving on a worn tire, knowingly worn. I mean, they knew it was worn, but they wanted to win. So they tried to prosecute him to say that, you're responsible for this and you're going to pay for these people's deaths. It was ultimately dismissed in 1961. So he was able to get out of it, which was great for him. But unfortunately, he got out of that and ran right into another problem, which was the Great Walkout of 1961.
I did not know about this.
So what this was, 1961, there was dissension in the Ferrari factories as a lot of their main guys, their top guys, were really starting to have problems with his wife because she was roaming around these halls, running everything. And she was if you thought he was mean, she was stern. She would tell you to your face.
You don't want to get
as
yelled
it
at
is.
by an
Especially
Italian woman.
back then,
Yes.
nobody wanted a woman telling
Oh,
a man
an
what
Italian
to do.
woman?
And an
Right.
Italian woman that's mad on top. Oof.
Oh, and I've lived with those all my life. You don't want any of that. They're brutal. And so I could only imagine what it was like being a worker. And there were specific ones, unfortunately, that she harped on really bad, that were like their main engineers and their main fabricators and all those guys.
Yeah, Geppetto,
And-
Spaghetto, and
Yeah.
Elliot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Alfredo.
Last chance.
Yeah.
We want to eject you out of this episode too.
I'm looking on my notes. I do
that
not
on
see
there?
a
Okay.
Geppetto Spaghetto.
Oh God!
So
Don't do it.
we'll hope we're not doing that. So what ended up happening was they had enough with his wife. Because if you can imagine her walking around, Enzo's not doing anything. He's just secluded doing his own thing in his office every day. Probably, back then there was no YouTube to watch. But I mean, he wasn't doing anything. He really wasn't overseeing anything.
Not even taking meetings.
And this is a woman that's angry. She's lost her son. She knows her husband's having an affair that's open, that he's just doing it right under their nose. Doesn't matter. It's just what he's doing.
Child, has another
live with it.
home, a whole other life.
Right.
Yeah.
Live with it or whatever. So she's taking it out on all these guys. So they all get together. And in 1961, they all go into the office and confront Enzo and say, look, there's...
Is this the confrontation? This doesn't...
They look very happy in this photo.
It's the happiest walkout I've ever seen.
No, that's Laura Ferrari on the right.
Yes, on the far right.
Oh, okay.
So they come in and they confront her and they confront Enzo and they say, look, this has got to stop. That we can't
Get
work
your
under
woman
these
out
conditions.
of our business.
Yeah, keep it out of it. We let us do our thing. We cannot work like this anymore. And so there's two stories of which way this went. One of the stories is that they all walked out. Enzo said, I'm sorry, this is what she's doing, and you have to live with it. And they all said, we're done. We're just leaving. The other story is that he fired them all on the spot. I would believe the latter one, knowing what type of person Enzo was.
Yeah.
Was that he's not going to be told what to do. And he's certainly going to be told that his wife is going to be told what to do. So he probably just said, you know what, enough of you guys. So about this same time is when a young Ferruccio Lamborghini comes to Enzo and tries to explain to him that the clutches that he uses, they're just not reliable.
So at the time, Mr. Lamborghini is a tractor maker, and he's
Yes.
selling agricultural equipment and tractors, and not cars.
And not cars.
But he had some ideas for Ferrari.
He did, and he came in respectfully.
And he was a successful man himself. This was
Yeah.
not a man off the street.
enough to buy a Ferrari.
Yeah,
right?
that's what. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy that had money. And so Enzo literally just told him that I'll stick to making cars, you stick to making tractors, which pissed him off. Like, this is, this guy spent all this time to get a meeting with Enzo to just basically say, look, I have some ideas. This is going to be great for you, and he just shut him down.
Constructive criticism, one professional to another.
Boy,
There's no... Not with Italian hotheads with those kind of egos, right?
No, and it did not go well. So on the drive home, Ferruccio was so angry that he's like, I am going to build my own car, my own sports car that will rival Ferrari. And he was able to do that in 4 months.
Wild.
Which is unheard of. In today's time, you could never build a car to the standards of what a Ferrari or a Lamborghini would be in 4 months.
Well, there's probably a few employees available from
There were...
Ferrari.
You are leading me on perfectly, my friend.
Very nice.
Yeah, so what actually happened was Ferruccio got wind of the walkout, which is why they call it the Great Walkout, because it was. And he took their 5 top guys, got them in a room and said, can you build me a car in 4 months that will rival Ferrari's best at the time, which I believe was the 250 at that point. It might have been around
275.
that. Yeah, 275, maybe somewhere in that window.
Yeah, okay.
And so they took the task, and in 4 months, the first Lamborghini road car, the 350 GT, was built.
Yeah, that was a beautiful car
it's
too.
pretty.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I'm glad we have
Beautiful car. Now, Ferrari wasn't too worried about this first car because it was slow and heavy. This was their first foray, a 4-month build. So they were,
Right.
They weren't too concerned. And the 5 guys that actually were that had left were also working on another race team that they wanted to basically eradicate Ferrari as well with on the side along with this. Unfortunately, that only folded after a year because at the end of the day, Ferrari, even losing all those guys, was still a monster. So they were going to get other guys that were going to be amazing. They just needed time to develop them. So it really kind of helped his ego a little bit, like,
Yeah, we're fine.
yeah, build your 350.
Yeah.
We don't care.
Whatever.
It's not going to matter. Great. You sell a few. Fine. You're not going to be a problem. Well, it wasn't a problem until 1967, which was the first legitimate threat to Enzo that really woke him up. And that
Miura?
was
The Miura?
the Lamborghini Miura.
Yeah.
Yummy, yummy.
And I understand why,
Yes.
because oof.
This one got him hot
Mm-hmm.
because now this went from like little brother to, we are on the same level.
Well, in Ferrari, he only wanted his engines in the front as far
Correct.
as in his passenger cars.
Never
right? The 12
V12,
cylinders. Right.
V12 in the front. And so he was forced to make some that didn't.
And that one is not. So
No.
that's a pretty amazing thing. And I have the tractor. I have a 1968 or 9 R230 diesel tractor, 2 cylinders, 6-speed, all-wheel drive on the farm. That's my only Lamborghini that I have right now. And but they were building that at the same time as they're building the Muro, which is just crazy to
Wild.
think. Yeah.
It's nuts. Absolutely nuts. And that forced him to up his game. He's like, okay, we need to up our game at this point because this is serious. Like this is not just some guy out of his shop making, hoopty wannabe sports cars. That is arguably one of the most beautiful designs of all time.
Right.
And so that got him woken up. But then in 1969, emission standards hit over there. And so they were Ferrari is like, well, we need to look for some partnerships because now we don't really know this. This is not our realm. We need to get some partnerships. So they sold 50% of Ferrari to Fiat.
Whoa.
Back in 69 to kind of get a little because Fiat apparently had kind of the inner edge to the workings of this.
So this is a year or two after the Ford versus Ferrari
Correct.
part.
Year or two after that.
So Ford wanted to buy Ferrari, and then that's another thing with the ego.
That was my next thing. Yeah. So it was actually offered to Ford, but the reason why Ferrari declined it was because one of the main things in the contract was that Enzo would have control of the racing side.
Oh.
And Ford did not want that. So Enzo said basically to kick rocks.
No deal.
Which he would have been a very, very wealthy man. He could have gone and had all the mistresses he wanted, all over Italy, all the mansions he wanted, and he gave it up for ego.
Ego, which is it's the number one thing that can get
it sounds like a theme here.
that could get in your way.
And then runs into money trouble and then has to partner up with Fiat anyway, right?
Fiat, who's making just regular passenger cars.
So
by comparison.
after that happened, then Enzo decided he was going to really focus on the Formula One program.
Okay.
Which was a huge success. I mean, from the 70s, from 75 to 83, they won 6 constructor championships. But all through this time, Enzo was still not leaving his factory. He was just, he was trying to do his best. He was, he was getting older. At this point, he had the fire, but he just didn't have, the ability. And so what this is a wonderful picture of, this is in 1983. This is the one time he went to Imola and met with Gilles Villeneuve. And that was kind of a big thing for him. He was really taken by Villeneuve for whatever reason. And so this was a nice little meeting that they did at Imola. And it was one of the only times you ever saw him outside of any track other than Fiorano, which Fiorano was the test track they built in the 70s. Yeah. That is still around today. They still test Ferraris on today. So then, there it is right there.
Nice.
Which looks like a fun track to drive.
Yeah, it does look like so awesome.
Look at that straightaway. So in 1978, his wife Laura dies. And so now he's kind of left of he's at a crossroads. He's like, I'm not sure what he's going to do. He's just kind of stuck. In a sense of he's successful, he's got everything, but he's really, his personal life is gone at this point.
Right. Well, he had one son that was alive from the mistress.
Yes,
that
Piero.
was working for the company.
Piero.
And he's not recognized as the son officially until I think she dies, right?
Correct, because in Italian law you can't be.
Right.
So in typical Italian law, you have to wait for someone to croak.
Yeah. So he has a successor, sort of.
In a sense, yes. And so he eventually. He was always with the company. Piero was always with the company, but unfortunately in 1988, when Enzo passed away, that's when Piero took over.
Okay.
As the head of Ferrari, as we know it, and still is today as the vice chairman. So really, Enzo towards the end of his life, what he really did was he oversaw a lot of the road cars being built. Obviously the F40 was.
Wasn't that the last car?
Literally, it was supposedly the last car, but it was not the last car.
Ah.
So the F40 is the one everybody thought was the last car that Enzo had a say in or really kind of oversaw before he passed, which is not true. But it is arguably, I would say not even arguably, it is the most iconic design of any Ferrari. If you're going to go out with one, this is the story you'd want to have, not the one I'm about to tell you. So what actually the truth of the matter is the car that he was on his deathbed basically overseeing and kind of putting cues into was the 328.
Really?
Was the later 328. So that was the last car he oversaw, really, that had a design influence in and where it went. And that was literally the last of the last for him. So, he just...
Interesting.
An incredible man, learning about him and everything about him, how ruthless he was, how he didn't really care, and there's the 328.
Right.
How he really didn't care about the drivers themselves, but where he came from. As a young boy, young man, that really cared so much about the engines and felt like the car had its own life, to then go the other way and be like, okay, well, I guess he still cared about the car, but never really cared about the driver, the person involved. Never gave
the
them,
buyer.
or the
He
buyer.
just cared about his cars.
or his
Like-
cars.
Like my favorite story I think about him is with Miami Vice and the Daytona. Do you know this story?
I do not.
So, in the beginning of the Miami Vice TV show, they used fake Ferrari Daytonas. And Enzo was watching the show in the 80s. He's about to die. Loves the show. When he finds out that they're fake Ferraris that they're using in the show, he is furious. He's like, you're using fake car. Of course, there's all these fake replicas that pop up, and then Ferrari sues them out of existence. But, it's like whack-a-mole to take these all out. And so he reaches out to the producers of Miami Vice and says, I will give you Ferrari Testarossas to use in the show, but you have to blow up those pieces of shit. And that's what they do. And then whatever season changeover, they blow up the Daytona, and he has to maintain his cover, so he needs a car to maintain his cover, and Ferrari sends white Testarossas,
Which became then iconic.
which
for
became the iconic.
God.
I mean, what a great marketing
Beautiful.
thing
So
to do, to have on the biggest TV show basically at the time, to have your flagship car in it, and all it cost was 2 Testarossas.
And I mean, that's the best color for a Testarossa. I'm sorry.
That's the one I had briefly.
I was so sad when was it title issues?
It was title problems where I sent it back. Yeah,
That car had the best road presence I've ever seen. The way that thing
I had the
looked.
white one for a short time. I had the black one for a shorter time because I had to sell it to pay taxes. But as far as Ferraris, your 355 that you were neglectful with and burned to the ground was my first one. And then my second one was, I think, the 348 with 100,000 miles on it. And I love that car. It was a
Didn't you have this
amazing
in
machine.
between? Or no, this was
Well, you
your
did
first
have one of them. Well, you had a red Testarossa in there somewhere.
Well, no, I had the white Testarossa,
You had the white one
and then
first,
the
and then the
348.
355.
Did you have a red one before the white one?
No,
No.
never had a red one.
Never had a red one.
Is there anything about an Enzo?
There's a couple. I wanted to say a couple fun little. Well, I'm not gonna call them fun facts because these aren't fun. But
Okay.
So a couple things that you don't know. I mean, I think we learned a lot about Enzo here today, and I think that there's some things you probably knew, some things you didn't know. Here's a couple off the wall things that you may not have known, and these are clearly rumors, unsubstantiated. But in 1944, there was a driver named Tony Paravano, was an Italian racing driver, and he was known to be that was the guy who was spread eagle on the car. Kind of looking all, Fonzie-ish. There
Okay,
he is.
yeah.
Tony
Heck
Paravano.
yeah. What a suit.
So Tony was a racing driver and then became a ghost. Vanished off the face of the earth. No one knows what happened to him, but rumor has it that there was something going on with the Italian mafia and Enzo Ferrari, but it was very unsubstantiated. Like you couldn't really, there was no proving that or anything at all like that. It was just, it's in the, if you're in Italy, and you're
Sometimes
a powerful
you get
man.
disappeared.
Yeah, you get disappeared.
That's Italy's Jimmy Hoffa right
yeah.
there.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's
Okay.
arguably the most iconic name in Italian most anything. Everybody knows who Enzo Ferrari is. And when you have that kind of power back then, the mob was running rampant all over the place. So they're probably, did he have mob ties? Probably. Can you prove it? No. But I mean, they would have always been on his side. I mean, that's somebody you're going to want on your side regardless. So... yeah, I thought that was really interesting about that. And in 2017, there was a group of Italian grave robbers who tried to dig his grave up and dig his body up for ransom against the actual burglar.
Okay.
Yeah, as
I
you
believe
can see.
that's actual
That's his
security.
mugshot,
This
yeah.
is the security footage.
This is the Italian. This is the Italian.
For those listening, it's just a stock photo of a criminal that looks like the Hamburglar a little bit.
But he's doing the hand.
Yeah, okay.
So-
Got it.
So in true Italian bad burglar fashion, they were going to actually dig him up, exhume the body, and then ransom it off to the family, to Piero.
That is so-
and they raided some. I forget what building it was. It was a building that had like some of the suspects, and one of them had the notes, the plans written down in a notebook, like to a T of
always
what they were
smart to
going to
write
do.
down your crime.
And 30 people were arrested and charged with that. And so it was going to happen. They just got caught.
Damn.
And grave robbing was a problem. I mean, back even up modern times, it happens a lot. Out there in Italy, a lot of famous people get dug up and ransomed. This was just another way to get money. Which, I mean, here I don't think you ever really hear about that here. I don't know that no one's
not
digging
like
it
Very
out.
odd. So they were unsuccessful.
Unsuccessful.
Okay.
And so-
he is still resting in peace.
He is still resting
to this day.
in peace to this
with
day.
quite a legacy.
Quite a legacy.
Yes. So any Ferrari at any time. I mean, taking money away from it,
Can we
obviously.
take the
what,
F40 out?
See,
I was
what
gonna
one that you would actually want to own and drive? Like, is it F40? Is that just...
Well, let's take the F40 out because I think that's everybody's easy pick, and it's a $2.5 million or whatever it is.
I don't know. 275 GTB 4 cam would be mine. You know,
what is the okay? This is where I
because Nicolas Cage and Gone in 60 Seconds. That was the monologue. Where
I-
a
wouldn't sold
self-indulgent wiener would buy himself a
Yes.
new. But if I were a connoisseur, I would buy a 275 GTB 4 cam.
For me, if I remember right, and I believe this was one of the turbo cars, it's a 288 GTO.
Okay.
Yes,
That
was
car
that was the first big
Is
one.
unbelievably beautiful. Just I believe it has
Now,
No,
there's
that's from
Nicolas
Gone in
Cage
60
saying
Seconds, yeah.
355 is a self-indulgent
the
wiener's car.
355 to me was like, for me, it would be a red coupe if I was to do a 355.
Okay.
I got the black one because it was, on Facebook Marketplace and cheap.
Oh.
So true to brand and clearly needing a fuel line.
Because
But
you bought that 355 from an Italian mobster in a candy
there
factory,
it
right?
is. Look at that.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah,
I
but-
bought it from an Armenian candy factory mobster that I wouldn't
Okay.
even, they had a false wall and I couldn't even to sign something, they had to go bring it around the wall and then come back. And it was just sitting in the factory, just dusty as anything. This was one of those ones where I'm like, I don't know how I made it out of this.
And
This-
he didn't do the fuel recall, and you didn't
Well,
do
yeah,
the fuel
that's
recall, and
3
you killed the car. You killed the car.
You didn't do it either.
I was doing it. I had it for 3 months. I had a plan. You had it for years.
Do we have to go with the
and
concepts of
you
a plan
killed
again?
it. You are
Parker killed it.
No.
Yes.
He was driving it, and the fuel line let go. It was a week away from getting done. I had a plan.
You can't prove that. You can't prove your plan. You weren't going to fix that. It burned down. Then
That's
you noticed
why it was in California. The whole reason was to drive it for Monterey Car Week and then leave it there for the free recall to get done, and then I could ship it home. It was a perfect idea. It was a perfect plan.
Well, apparently you got the email because I never got the fuel line email.
So
Yeah, they don't send it to the fifth owners usually.
Well, that's exactly right. How was I supposed to know?
So for me, like my 599 it's everything I want. The Enzo V12, gated manual transmission. It's that classic look, and then just the classic V12 manual transmission. 700 horsepower, of course. It's so I'm very, very happy with that. And for the price point, it's not millions of dollars like some of the other collectible Ferraris. It was something I paid a little over $100,000 for, which is a lot, but you compare that to an Enzo when it's in the Enzo and the engine, it's millions of dollars. So that's why that one's been around for going on 4 years now.
Yeah,
I can't think of anything better as far as bang for the buck than this car.
Yeah, don't ever sell that.
I don't want to. I keep trying not to, but
don't ever sell that car. If you're out there listening, do not offer him anything on it. Don't sell that.
The Venezia paint is, the kind of the purple. So initially, I called it Venezia for many years until Shmi came up and slapped me and said, "By the way, it's Venezia. It's how they pronounce
Venezia.
it." And he just picked up his 12 cylindry or whatever
and
it is
a
in
really
gold or
interesting
whatever.
color
Really
combo.
cool spec on
Yeah,
that one.
really.
So, the legacy continues as far as the front engine V12 stuff with Enzo. So. And
yeah,
you've got your Maserati,
I do have a
so-
Maserati, which is basically a
basically
Ferrari.
a Ferrari.
If you
I
ask any Maserati guy ever, it's
they'll tell you that.
basically
It's a Ferrari-derived
It's
V8.
not.
So then
it
I'm the
is so
288
different.
GTO. What's yours?
No cost. I really do like the F50 because
Really?
the F40 is cool and it's awesome and it's twin turbo and all stuff. But I thought the F50 always had more road presence. It's such a wide, big, imposing car. I know it's not as fast and all that stuff, but the roof comes off. It's got a lot of cool things to it. I've always gotten more excited seeing an F50 than an F40. Not to say I don't like the F40, but see, like something like that is pretty
Fitty.
much perfect. But
Okay.
I've also always said my dream Ferrari two-car garage is a 430 Spider and a 599. They were
Okay.
just the perfect mixture of analog and
Except
everything.
Elliot loves flappy paddle gearboxes.
do.
Yes,
he
he
loves
does.
F1s. He thought me ripping the F1 out of that and
Was
putting
it-
in a gated was a bad move.
yes, it was a good financial move, but it was. I like by the time you got to the 599 and the 430, the single clutches were pretty good. And I think it's an interesting. I could go on about this for a whole podcast episode.
Could be the next
but it
one.
is an interesting time period.
That's what he
in
does
history.
on the second date.
It's like-
usually is talk
yeah,
about how
single
much better
clutch
the
transmissions.
flappy
Talk about their
paddles
flappy
are.
paddles.
Yeah, I talk about banging off a full throttle shift in an
Banging.
early an early
The
single
banging
clutch
is
car.
not happening.
No. Nor-
Well, if it does, then they don't.
I
Come
know.
back.
And
probably
Jake is a big manual guy, so he's just really
Look at that.
emphasizing the manual over
Probably
here.
some flappy paddling
And
going
don't
on.
get me wrong. As much as you guys have owned the Ferraris through various experiences, I've gotten to drive quite a few of them, and I do like the gated manuals. But it's just the single clutch cars were so special,
Right.
and I know that's why the prices reflect that. But
Well, Rob, your first outing as a storyteller, you were worried about it.
I was very
You did a
worried
great
about
job.
it.
You did great.
Thank
You did.
I mean, it's one of those things you get in your own head. You know, you're in your mind, you're like, I'm going to stutter, stop. But then once you start telling a story, and Enzo is such an easy target because the guy was fascinating. I mean,
Right.
there's so much to him. You know, he's a villain, he's a hero, he's a villain again. You know, a lot of times the villains and the heroes are the same person. I mean, I think we all have a little villain and hero in all of us.
And it makes more interesting as far as now there's no like clean superhero and a superhero move now. They're all anti-heroes
Oh,
with a chip
always.
on their shoulder and all that stuff because it's a way more interesting character than, Superman just,
his whole life, his whole life was
absolutely.
saving children.
Anyway, thank you all so much for listening or watching our second Car Simps. And also, I have set up a Patreon if you'd like to contribute and help these guys out because they spend a lot of time researching their stories. And both of them are about to get fired from their jobs, honestly, because of all
Probably.
their distractions. I mean, Rob and his liquor rep, he's been very frustrated with that for a while. And Elliot works for his father, and he's been fired twice and hired back, I think, a couple of
I think
times.
so. Yeah, that sounds about right.
They're
Save us.
so, please join the Patreon. Also, you can ask questions in there, and we'll answer it at the end of the next podcast. You'll also get early access to the recording as well. So I'll have that
good perks.
linked below. Thank you again so much for watching. And we'll see you next week. Elliot is going to do the rise and fall of Infinity. Ooh, messed that up. Infinity. Japanese luxury on the rocks.
There was a rise.
There was.
There's a-
We'll get into it next week, Rob.
Okay, it's good to know.